Let's listen to him, actually. Of course, opposition defence spokesperson James Patterson, he's called on the government to place temporary exclusion orders on the so-called ISIS brides seeking to return back to Australia, warning that their return would jeopardise the safety and security of the country. And it's certainly hard to disagree with that. Of course, these people left Australia to allegedly join a terror group. There are reports today that 3 of the so-called ISIS brides are considered high risk, have reportedly not been interviewed by authorities in 3 years. Let's listen to James Patterson earlier on Sky News Today.
Well, we're relying on media reports only here, Laura. The government hasn't actually provided any information about what they know, about when they knew it, and about what they're doing to manage this risk to the Australian population. But self-evidently, someone who left our country to join a listed terrorist organisation like ISIS, by definition, poses some level of risk, and the height and the exact level of that risk will depend on their individual circumstances that we don't know. But I'm very concerned that we appear to have a freelance repatriation operation being run by a private citizen. Media reports indicate Dr. Jamal Rifi is running this. Now, he's a respected member of the community, but he's a private citizen. He shouldn't be running repatriation operations. And he is also known to be a close personal friend.
What do you make of James Patterson's comments there and this ISIS bride story in general? I mean, so many people are concerned about this.
Yeah, look, obviously we're right to be concerned and we should be very careful. It's incredibly complex. And again, there's so much, as James was saying, there's so many things we don't know. So I know Jamal Rifi really well. He's an incredibly good, decent man. He himself has been the target of threats, death threats by ISIS and ISIS-associated or ISIS-influenced people in Australia, in his own community. And so he knows more than anyone. He's got more skin in the game. I mean, he and his family have had to move house. They've had to take out all sorts of protective actions against exactly this kind of radicalisation. So I guess if he is there actually doing it, I think he's more at risk himself than anyone. So that gives me actually some faith, believe it or not. And you would have heard James Patterson say he's an incredibly respected member of the community. He is one of the moderates that has come out against, for example, a Muslim Voice or Muslim Votes Matter or the various myriad sort of Muslim movements that ran against Labor from the hard extreme, left, if you like, at the last election. Anthony Albanese has obviously said they will get no government assistance, they will not be repatriated. The question is, if they are citizens, if they have not been convicted of any crime in their host countries, what can you actually do to stop them coming back to Australia? And legally, my understanding is that there is just not, we need to have our intelligence agencies looking at them, examining them, screening them, assessing the level of threat, monitoring it when they're back here. But again, if they're citizens and they want to come back to Australia and they're not being detained in a foreign country, I'm not sure what legal recourse the government has to stop them. It certainly doesn't have to assist them, but if they're just there seeking consular assistance,
even today, a former AFP Detective Superintendent David Craig warned that this ISIS brides, this group attempting to return to Australia, it poses an unacceptable risk to the community. I don't think Australians.
Yeah, certainly some do. The question is, again, there's going to be a cohort that were radicalised themselves and bought into all this stuff. There is probably almost certainly a cohort who was coerced, who were forced to go by their partners. Islamist extremists are not known for being particularly progressive when it comes to gender politics.
What a surprise.
What a surprise. So they could have just been forced. For some, it could be a combination of both. But again, I read those comments by the former AFP senior officer. Yes, there may be a risk. That risk has to be managed and they have to be monitored and screened. But I don't know what legal mechanism, and no one has been able to explain exactly if they are citizens and they want to come home and no one's been able to prove that they've committed a crime or they haven't been convicted of it in that country or this one. Some might come home and face criminal charges here. That's great if they've done something. But if they haven't, how do you actually stop them under Australian law? That is the complicated question.
All right. Well, I want to talk about Victoria.
Yes.
There are calls for Victorian Premier Jacinta Allen to resign following allegations of massive CFMEU corruption. Of course, the Victorian Labor government is accused of either turning a blind eye or being incredibly incompetent after this report by respected corruption expert Jeffrey Watson found widespread corruption on Victoria's big build infrastructure program, an estimated $15 billion of taxpayer money allegedly funneled into the hands of criminals. Jacinta Allen rejects the claims that she turned a blind eye. She insists that she acted immediately by submitting a complaint to IBAC in 2024. If she refuses to call for a royal commission, in my opinion, just watching her press conferences and taking questions from reporters, a lot of deflection. It reminds me of the Daniel Andrews era. But Victorians have suffered so much, particularly during COVID, those lockdowns, and now to hear reports that potentially their taxpayer money is going to criminals.
Outrageous.
They deserve a bit better than what
that's
they're
right.
getting.
And there have been question marks over the activities of the CFMEU in Victoria. The Victorian branch is particularly full on and militant, and there have been questions about its links to both Allen and the Andrews government as well. It is an absolutely appalling look. Obviously, the CFMEU is currently persona non grata in the Labor Party and among the broader Labor movement because of their actions. Jacinta Allen saying, "Oh no, I acted in 2024, I referred it to IBAC." Well, IBAC said, "No, we can't actually act on this because it's outside our jurisdiction," and she just dropped it like, oh, what a shame. Oh, well, if only there was something we could do.
If
only we knew someone in the government who could maybe change the law so that you could act on it or refer it to another actual inquiry that could actually look into it like a royal commission.
Imagine,
for example,
imagine
if only I knew someone who had those kinds of magical powers.
Only we could get some answers.
And again, as Anthony Galloway made a really good point in The Australian talking about this, the one good story that the state Labor government has to tell is its infrastructure spend, what it calls the big build, as you said. And, look at all these things we're building, the Sky Rail, the suburban rail loop. Look at all these magical things we're giving you, Victoria. Don't worry about the debt. Look at all these.
Look at the debt.
Yeah, don't worry about what the product costs, but look at how beautiful and shiny it is. But now, of course, they can't talk about that without questions about the CFMEU's role being raised, which means that they can't campaign on that at the upcoming state election.
Oh, no.
And so what do they campaign on? Obviously, they're in a world of pain in the polls. They're probably a better, sharper, tougher, stronger campaigning machine than the Libs are, who have, won election in more than the last 20 years.
Yep.
But it does it basically kicks out a pretty big stilt underneath their Queenslander, if you like.
Well, I want to move on to what is happening in America or out of space, potentially.
Yes.
Former President Barack Obama has backtracked after claiming that aliens are real. Let's just listen to what he had to say during an interview with Brian Tyler Cohen.
Are aliens real?
They're real, but I haven't seen them, and they're not being kept in... what is it?
Area 51?
Area 51. There's no underground facility unless there's this enormous conspiracy and they hid it from the President of the United States.
What was the first question you wanted answered when you became president?
Where are the aliens?
Where are the aliens?
Where are the aliens?
He's
since backtracked and issued a clarification on Instagram saying, I was trying to stick with the spirit of the speed round, but since it's gotten attention, let me clarify statistically, the universe is so vast that the odds are good that there's life out there, but the distances between solar systems are so great that the chances we've been visited by aliens is low. And I saw no evidence during my presidency that aliens have made contact with us.
The conspiracy
Is he telling the truth?
Of course he's not. They're all there in Roswell. We all know they live amongst us. I could name a few myself, actually. I'm pretty sure are aliens. That's right. But no, he's absolutely right. And this is something, and I want to clarify, because I did notice this story, but I was not the one who suggested this topic. This is
no, it was me. I listen to a lot of podcasts.
And it landed in my inbox, and I went, oh my God, this
Brilliant.
is my favourite subject.
I have had a feeling that you would be the person I can discuss aliens with.
I'm obsessed with something called the Fermi paradox, right?
Okay.
And this was something that came up, that was come up with by the Italian physicist Enrico Fermi, right? And there's this famous story that him and all his fellow physicists, they're all working on this project together. They go out for lunch and they're just shooting the breeze, right? And they're sitting out at lunch and he goes, look, statistically, and this is exactly what Obama said, statistically, aliens must exist, right? Yeah. And they calculate the thing, I don't know, whatever physicists do. So, there's X billion million stars and X billion million planets and an infinite number of, whatever. And so it's like, yep, it's actually indisputable. Mathematically speaking, aliens definitely exist,
okay,
right? And Enrico Fermi supposedly said these famous lines, so, where is everybody? It's like, where are they? Right here. And so they start sort of spitballing that and thinking, what is it? And of course they figure out, and this is what Obama's getting at, they figure out that to develop the technology needed for interstellar travel between stars or solar systems, you would first have to develop the technology that could destroy your own planet.
Okay.
So basically to get to the level of technological advancement where you could, jump through wormholes or
like that movie,
travel through
Interstellar,
dimensions or travel at light speed or whatever, you must first, by logic, have to have developed enough technology where you could do terrible things to yourself first. And so they figured out that pretty much everyone had self-combusted before they'd got to the level to develop the technology needed to get there. And the best part about this story, given that we're talking about, worldwide planetary extinction, is that the project they were working on was the Manhattan Project. Enrico Fermi was one of the physicists who developed the nuclear bomb.
Wow.
And so he was actually developing that technology that could destroy a world before we got to the next step of being able to visit another one. So how's that?
There you go.
What a topic. There you go.
We've solved the right person to bring on to discuss aliens in depth.
That's
We're going to
right.
have to keep talking about it. I do find it interesting that Barack Obama was a quick yes and then backtracking.
Well, because that's right. Because the question is, are there aliens somewhere?
Yes.
Mathematically, there has to be.
Are they here?
Are they here? Nah.
Maybe.
They're maybe as part of the stardust that they've turned themselves into.
Still a maybe.
Hitting the red button.
Joe Hildebrand, thank you so much. Wonderful to talk to you.
Always a pleasure.